Hey y'all, I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate, and we're bringing you another episode of our podcast. And today we are talking about you first-time home buyers who are considering buying something here in North Carolina. So first of all, what is a first-time home buyer? Like, who does that apply to? Well, one would immediately think it means somebody who's buying a home for the first time, meaning they've never gone through this process before. But there's another group of you guys that I think can kind of be on the underbelly that we need to talk about. And that's those of you who have never bought a home in the state of North Carolina. There are a lot of just things that are different here that you need to be aware of. So those of you who have never been through the process, that's who I'm talking to today. But those of you who have never bought in North Carolina, we have a whole backlog of content I would highly recommend you check out that talks about some of the things that makes North Carolina kind of a fickle beast, and you really want to make sure you're prepared for that before you buy real estate here. So you first-time home buyers, something to think about in your steps in your process is how do you find an agent? So there's a couple of different methods that you can use. One of the best methods that we recommend here at Relevate is a referral. So asking the people that you know, who do you know, like, and trust, and see who comes to mind. Obviously, there's a couple other backup methods, like one of the best ones to kind of grab some popcorn and watch is post it on a Facebook group and see how many responses you get. And then obviously you can go with the good old-fashioned Google search, or if you just got a recommendation maybe from the apartment complex that you were living in. Something else that you need to be aware of is what is a buyer agreement. So back in August of this past year, on August 17th, the rules kind of changed. So before you ever go and tour a property, you have to be in a written buyer agency agreement. Basically, think of it as a contract that kind of outlines what you're responsible for and what services they're providing. So this has to be very clear. It's always negotiable, but that's another big step in the process of securing somebody who's going to best represent you throughout the journey. Another one is, what are your options for financing? Well, one of the best resources that you can access is a local loan officer. So somebody who's not only great at the mortgage process, but also is local to the area and actually understands the nuances of our market here. I have worked with folks who have used national lenders or even folks from other states, and it's worked out great. You just want to make sure that those folks are aware of North Carolina. Obviously, regardless, they have to be licensed to do that in that process here in our great state. But you just want to kind of ask them some questions like, do they know what due diligence is? That is one of the best ways to vet somebody on their preparedness to work with you in our market space. But your different options for financing, you've got your conventional mortgage loans. Remember, these are the ones that are privately backed by either banks, a mortgage lender, or like a credit union. You also have those federal loan programs. These are going to be your government-backed loans, like, for example, your VA, FHA, USDA. There are some state-funded grants as well, in addition to like local governments or even some nonprofits that have some things that could be added to a particular mortgage product. So make sure you're talking to your loan officer on what is going to apply most to you. One of the big ones I get asked is, are there any first-time home buyer like products out there? So that is something that's going to vary based on who you're working with, but it's not a bad question to ask. Anything you can do that's going to help lower an interest rate and lower your out-of-pocket costs, and that's your down payment, your closing costs, is going to be really beneficial to you. And you're typically only going to be a first-time home buyer once, so why not ask for those things? So another big question that we get with our first-time home buyers are there any ways that I can lessen the out-of-pocket costs or that burden? Yes. So you have access to a few different things. One, let's say you have family that's willing to give you part of your down payment or some liquidated costs towards this purchase. Not everybody has that, but if you do, something that's really important is to get these labeled as gift funds. So you have to track the money. So just make sure if Great Aunt Bertha has money buried in a tin can in her yard, that you actually have it documented where it's coming from, and then it's actually put into a bank account to kind of show that transfer. These gift funds typically have a special letter that they're also supposed to be given with. Another option would be asking the seller to contribute. This could be whether if it's a resale home and so there's another person on the other side of the table, or let's say you're buying new construction, asking the builder to contribute towards closing costs, or even doing a rate buy down. This can kind of help alleviate some of those out-of-pocket costs. Your out-of-pocket costs are typically going to be like your home inspections, appraisal, if you have to pay for part of your survey up front and things of that nature. So this is like a different category of this is not what's due on closing day. So what other resources are there that's available to you? Well, one of the big things that I would definitely recommend is going through a type of buyer orientation. So a sit down and a how-to with your agent that walks you through the process. Use this opportunity to front load the information. Get as much as you possibly can in a non-stressful time period, because you don't want to be hearing this stuff for the first time when you're having to make a time-sensitive decision about one of the biggest purchases you'll ever make in your entire life, and you're asking them, well, what is due diligence? We know that there's some of this language that obviously it's just kind of secondhand to us, and you're going to slowly start to kind of absorb it over time. But guys, coming from somebody who is a former teacher of 14 years, I can attest to this, that it's really important that you, in a non-stressful environment, sit down and ask questions. These can be just general questions, and there is legitimately no stupid question. Ask the things that you think you're supposed to know. Those are typically the things that we get asked the most because it's not common knowledge. You don't buy or even sell a home every day. The averages are anywhere from like 3 to 5 years, which is actually, I think, a little bit more often than people think this happens. But at the same time, especially if it's your first time buying a home, we as an agent don't expect you to already have this knowledge banked in your head. So use that get to know you time period to ask these questions. And it's also a great chance to kind of vet your agent a little bit more. Like, do they have the knowledge base that you want them to have in the particular type of home you're looking for? Or do you actually vibe with them? Having trust and kind of that rapport built with the person that you're going to be doing this with is so, so important. So use this opportunity to your advantage. And then one of the bigger things that I think we get asked is like, how do I know this is the best time for me or the best option for me? Should I even be buying a house right now? That is such an interesting multi-layered question. It really depends on what you're prepared to do. So one of the big things that I talk about with home ownership, especially if somebody's coming from, let's say, like a rental kind of background, think about all the things that you don't have to take care of in your rental that you will now have to take care of as the homeowner. So what are those things that are kind of transferring? So like lawn care, for example, or access to a gym or having a neighborhood pool. If something breaks, who's responsible for paying for that? There are a lot of things that are kind of your day-to-day as well as like your access to the perks you may not get with your new home. However, at the same time, one of the big ones that you'll hear a lot in this industry is that with a rental, you are putting that money in somebody else's pocket versus building your own equity. So my biggest piece of advice I can give to folks is, are you prepared to make that journey? And also keep in mind that typically your first home is not going to be your forever home. Make those concessions on what you're willing to kind of get away with and deal with early on, because that equity is going to compound. And by the time you get a little bit older and a little bit further down the line, you're going to be really glad that you have that kind of nest egg to rely on. So if you have more questions or you're interested in just starting the process, feel free to use the contact information that's listed at the bottom of this screen. You can find us on multiple platforms everywhere, but I'm Laura Richardson with Relevate and here to help you in any way that we can. We'll see you next time.